All right, welcome to another deep dive. I am so excited about the sources you sent over this time. Excerpts from Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass.
Yeah.
I've heard so much about this book, and I know it's helped a ton of people, but honestly, I always kind of roll my eyes at the title. Like, okay, sure, we get it. Be a badass.
Right.
But after actually reading these excerpts, it's way more nuanced and thought-provoking than I expected.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the whole badass thing, it's not just about, being tough or aggressive or whatever. It's more about like ditching those self-sabotaging habits and fears that are holding us back from really like living our best lives.
Right, exactly.
Creating a life we actually love, not the one we think we should be living.
And I love that it's not all just fluffy affirmations and positive
Yeah.
thinking. Sincero gets into some deep stuff about, like, understanding our subconscious beliefs and how those are often running the show without us even realizing it.
Totally. That's actually one of the things I love most about her approach. She doesn't shy away from the psychological stuff, like how our past experiences, especially in childhood, can really shape our beliefs about ourselves and the world.
Totally. And how those beliefs can totally sabotage us in adulthood if we don't, like, become aware of them and start to challenge them.
It's like we're operating on outdated software, you know?
Exactly. And she has this great analogy of the subconscious mind being like a little kid who just believes everything it's told, no questions asked.
Yeah.
So if we grew up hearing messages like money doesn't grow on trees, or you have to work hard to be successful, or rich people are greedy, our subconscious is like, okay, got it. That's how the world works.
Yeah, and then we carry those beliefs with us into adulthood and wonder why we're struggling with money or feeling stuck in a dead-end job.
It's so true. I mean, I never really thought about it before, but so many of my beliefs about money come from my family. Like, my parents were always super frugal, which is great in some ways, but it's also made me kind of scared to spend money on myself, even when I could afford it. Like, I always felt guilty or something.
Yeah, I get that. Sincero talks about that too, how those early money messages can really mess with us, even if they were well-intentioned.
Totally. Oh, and remember that story she tells about the bowling alley accident?
Oh, yeah, where she tripped and totally wiped out because she was so focused on impressing some guy.
Yes. And she later realized that the accident was actually a metaphor for how her subconscious need for validation was tripping her up in other areas of her life, like her career and relationships.
It's like she was literally and figuratively falling for those old patterns of seeking approval from others instead of trusting herself.
Ugh, it's so crazy how that stuff works. I mean, I don't have any bowling alley accident stories, but I can definitely relate to making decisions based on what I thought other people expected of me rather than what I truly wanted.
I think we've all been there at some point.
Yeah, it's like we're living in this big snooze, as Sincero calls it, just kind of sleepwalking through life based on these outdated beliefs.
Oh, the big snooze, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like we're accepting a reality that's way less than what we're capable of creating. Remember Shirley, the woman who dreams of opening her own nail salon, but is too scared to quit her soul-crushing job.
Oh, yeah, Shirley. She's like the poster child for the big snooze.
Totally.
But I think what's really cool is that Sincero doesn't just leave us hanging with the problem, you know?
Right.
She offers actual solutions, like practical steps for waking up from the big snooze and creating a life that's more aligned with who we really are.
Absolutely. That's what makes her work so empowering. It's not just about complaining about our problems. It's about taking responsibility and doing something to change them.
Totally. And speaking of solutions, Sincero talks a lot about the importance of connecting to something bigger than ourselves, which she calls source energy.
Right.
I have to admit, that part sounded kind of woo-woo to me at first.
Yeah, I get that. It can definitely sound a bit mystical or out there, especially if you're not into spirituality or whatever.
Exactly.
But I think what she's really getting at is the importance of tapping into a sense of purpose, a belief that we're supported by something larger than ourselves, whether that's the universe, God, nature, or whatever resonates with you.
Okay, that makes more sense.
It's not necessarily about religion, although it can be for some people.
Yeah, it's more about like shifting our mindset from fear and scarcity to trust and abundance. Right?
Exactly. And that shift can be really powerful because it allows us to tap into a source of strength and support that's always available to us.
I love that. But how do we actually do that? I mean, how do we connect to this source energy? It still feels a bit abstract to me.
Well, Sincero's a big advocate for meditation. She sees it as a way to quiet the mental chatter and connect to our inner wisdom, but she doesn't present it as some super serious esoteric practice. She actually tells this hilarious story about a woman who was so focused on meditating to meet the god Krishna that she totally missed him when he showed up.
Oh, I remember that story. It's so funny. And it makes a good point, right?
Exactly. It's about being present and open to receiving those unexpected blessings that might be right in front of us instead of getting caught up in our own heads.
So it's not just about sitting in lotus pose and chanting Om.
Not necessarily, although if that works for you, great. But it's more about finding ways to quiet the mind and connect to a sense of inner peace, even if it's just for a few minutes each day. Like, when was the last time you truly allowed yourself to just be without any distractions or to-do lists swirling in your head?
Oh, gosh, I don't even know.
Right. It's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of life that we forget to just pause and breathe.
Sincero talks about her experience in India, right?
Mhm.
Where she learned to loosen her bone and embrace the chaos and unpredictability of life.
Yes. That's such a great chapter. She was riding on this crowded, chaotic bus, and there are all these delays and detours, but people just kind of rolled with it.
Yeah.
It's like they understood that sometimes things just don't go according to plan, and that's okay.
And instead of getting all stressed out about it, they just kind of went with the flow and even found the humor in the situation.
Exactly. And I think that's something we can all learn from. It's about shifting from a mindset of control to one of surrender, trusting that even when things don't go our way, there's a bigger picture unfolding that we might not be able to see in the moment.
That's such a powerful shift in perspective. I'm definitely guilty of trying to control everything, and it just ends up creating more stress and anxiety.
It's so common, especially in our culture that values productivity and achievement. But Sincero's point is that sometimes the most fulfilling experiences come from letting go of our expectations and embracing the messiness of life.
I love that. And it reminds me of something else Sincero talks about, the importance of self-love.
Yes, self-love is such a crucial ingredient for creating a badass life.
And she's not just talking about bubble baths and treating yourself, although those are nice too.
Right, it's not just about pampering ourselves, although that's important too.
It's about accepting ourselves fully, flaws and all, which I think a lot of us struggle with.
Yeah.
What are some practical ways that we can cultivate more self-love in our lives?
Well, Sincero offers some great tips. One that really resonated with me is ditching the self-deprecating humor. It's so easy to make jokes at our own expense, but those little comments can actually chip away at our self-worth over time.
Yeah, I know I'm guilty of that. I've always been the funny one in my group of friends, but sometimes my humor can be a little too self-deprecating.
Right, and it's not about never making jokes, but it's about being mindful of how we're talking to ourselves, even in a joking way.
Totally. She also talks about the importance of receiving compliments gracefully, right?
Yes, instead of deflecting praise or downplaying our accomplishments, why not just say thank you and let the love in? That's so true. I know I'm guilty of brushing off compliments like, oh, this old thing, or it was nothing, really.
Right, but what we're really doing is rejecting the love that's being offered to us.
And it reinforces that belief that we're not worthy of receiving love or praise.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our inherent worthiness, regardless of what others think or say.
And Sincero also emphasizes the importance of taking care of our physical well-being, right?
Absolutely. She's not saying we all need to become gym rats or anything, but she stresses the importance of nourishing our bodies with healthy food, movement, and rest.
It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and respect that we would offer to someone we love.
Exactly.
You know, all of this talk about self-love makes me think about how often we compare ourselves to others, especially on social media. It's like a recipe for feeling inadequate.
Ugh, it's the worst. Scrolling through Instagram and seeing those perfectly curated highlight reels, it's so easy to fall into the comparison trap. Totally.
Yeah.
And Sincero makes a great point about this. She says that comparison is a surefire way to dim our own light.
Yes. She uses this brilliant analogy, asking us to imagine if Marilyn Monroe had compared herself to Kate Moss and tried to change her iconic curves.
Oh, I love that.
It's a reminder that we each have our own unique beauty and brilliance to offer the world.
Right.
And when we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, we're essentially telling ourselves that we're not enough.
Exactly. And that's where self-acceptance comes in.
Yes. It's about embracing our imperfections, celebrating our strengths, and recognizing that we are perfectly imperfect just the way we are.
I love that.
Yeah.
Perfectly imperfect. It's so true. We're all work in progress, and that's okay.
Absolutely. And it's about focusing on our own journey, not someone else's.
Exactly.
Because when we're busy comparing ourselves, we're missing out on all the amazing things that are happening right here, right now, in our own lives.
You know, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. It's really making me think about all the ways I've been holding myself back with these limiting beliefs and self-sabotaging habits.
I know, me too. It's like Sincero is giving us permission to be ourselves, to embrace our quirks, and to create a life that truly lights us up.
Exactly. And I think that's what being a badass is really all about.
I agree. It's not about being perfect or fitting into some mold. It's about being authentically ourselves and living a life that feels good on every level.
And that's a journey I'm excited to continue exploring.
Me too. You know, we were just talking about how important self-acceptance is.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties in with Sincero's ideas about like getting lost in the flow of doing what we love. Have you ever experienced that feeling where you're just so engrossed in an activity that time kind of melts away?
Oh, totally. For me, it's like when I'm playing music, I can get so lost in the music that I completely lose track of time. It's like nothing else exists in those moments.
Exactly. That's what Sincero's talking about. That state of flow where we're fully present, energized, and completely absorbed in what we're doing. And she argues that this flow state isn't just a pleasant side effect of doing something we enjoy. It's actually like essential for creating a life we truly love.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I've always wondered about this. Doesn't that flow eventually fade as we become more experienced? Like, think about learning a new skill.
Yeah.
At first, it's all exciting and challenging, but as we master it, doesn't it become, well, kind of routine?
It's a good question, and it's something Sincero addresses. She argues that expertise doesn't have to come at the expense of joy. We can be masters of our craft while still retaining that beginner's enthusiasm, that willingness to experiment and prone our boundaries. She talks about the importance of staying curious, approaching our work with a sense of playfulness, and like never losing sight of the joy that drew us to it in the first place.
I love that. It reminds me of something a mentor once told me. The day you stop learning is the day you start dying. It's about embracing that lifelong journey of growth and discovery, even as we become more skilled in our chosen fields.
Absolutely. Lifelong learning, for sure. And I think that ties in nicely with another concept Sincero explores, which is the power of giving and receiving. She argues that generosity isn't just about being nice, it's an energetic principle that creates abundance in all areas of our lives.
So it's not just about, like, donating to charity or volunteering our time.
Right, although those are definitely wonderful things to do.
It's about a more expansive view of generosity, right?
Exactly. It's about understanding that we live in a universe of reciprocity. The more we give, the more we open ourselves up to receive. And it doesn't have to be grand gestures. It could be as simple as leaving a bigger tip, offering a genuine compliment, or just holding the door open for someone. It's about shifting our focus from scarcity to abundance, trusting that there's more than enough to go around.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because I was just reading an article about the science of gratitude, and it turns out that there are actual physiological benefits to focusing on what we're grateful for. It can lower stress levels, improve sleep, and even boost our immune system.
It's amazing, right? And that's exactly what Sincero calls it, the gateway drug to awesomeness.
Seriously, she's not wrong.
When we focus on what we're grateful for, it raises our energetic frequency and makes us magnets for even more good stuff. It's like we're priming our minds to see the abundance that's all around us instead of dwelling on what we lack.
It's so true. Like,
Yeah,
when I'm feeling down or stressed, if I just take a few minutes to think about all the things I'm grateful for, it totally shifts my perspective.
totally. And speaking of shifting perspectives, Sincero also talks about the importance of authenticity, of being true to ourselves, even when it's scary.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Like, how do we balance being authentic with, not being a jerk?
Right. We don't want to be like, well, I'm just being authentic, and then use that as an excuse to be rude or inconsiderate.
Exactly.
And Sincero addresses that directly. She says that authenticity isn't about being a rebel or going against the grain just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
It's about honoring our true selves, our values, and our beliefs, and expressing those in a way that's both authentic and respectful.
Makes sense.
Like, she tells this funny story about how her family had this whole thing about rebelling against having to answer the phone politely. But even in their rebellion, they still maintain this deep sense of courtesy and respect. It's like they found a way to be authentic without sacrificing kindness.
That's a good point. It's about finding that balance between expressing ourselves honestly
Yeah.
and treating others with respect.
Exactly. And I think that ties into another important point Sincero makes, which is the importance of forgiveness.
Oh, forgiveness. Yeah. That's a tough one.
It can be, for sure. But Sincero argues that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah, such a powerful image.
Right. It's about recognizing that forgiveness isn't about condoning the other person's actions, but about freeing ourselves from the burden of anger and pain.
But how do we actually do that? I mean, it's one thing to say forgive, But when we've been hurt deeply, it can feel impossible to let go of that resentment.
Sincero offers some really helpful strategies. Like, one thing she suggests is to try to understand the other person's perspective, not to excuse their behavior, but to see things from their point of view.
Okay.
Oftentimes, when we can understand where someone's coming from, even if we don't agree with their actions, it can make it easier to let go of the anger.
That makes sense. Like maybe they were acting out of their own pain or fear, or maybe they were just having a bad day.
Exactly. And another thing she suggests is to practice gratitude. When we focus on the good in our lives, it can be harder to hold on to those negative feelings.
Oh, that's a good one. It's like when we're feeling grateful, it's hard to be angry at the same time.
Right. And Sincero even suggests writing thank you notes, not just to people, but to the universe itself. It's about taking the time to truly acknowledge the good in our lives, even the small stuff that we might take for granted.
I like that. It's like a daily reminder to appreciate all the blessings we have, even when things are tough.
Exactly. And this whole conversation about forgiveness and gratitude, it kind of brings us back to that idea of loosening your bone that Sincero talks about. Remember when we talked about that earlier?
Yeah, in the context of like letting go of expectations and embracing the unexpected.
Right. And in this context, she's talking about it as a key to tapping into what she calls the mother load.
The mother load, what's that?
It's like this source of infinite abundance and joy that's available to all of us, but we can only access it when we're willing to let go of our need for control and surrender to the flow of life.
That sounds kind of deep.
It is. And she connects it back to her experience in India, where she was struck by the people's ability to just embrace the unexpected, find humor in chaos, and simply go with the flow.
Oh yeah, like that crazy bus ride she was telling us about.
Exactly. And she encourages us to cultivate this loosening our bone attitude in all areas of our lives.
Okay, but how do we actually do that? I mean, it's one thing to embrace the unexpected on vacation, but it's a whole other thing to apply that same mindset to our daily lives, right?
Right, it's definitely a practice. But Sincero breaks it down into several key things we can do, like talking to strangers.
Oh gosh, I'm not good at that.
Me neither, but she says it's a great way to get out of our comfort zones and expand our social circles.
Okay.
And expecting the unexpected, instead of getting all freaked out when things don't go according to plan, try to see it as an adventure.
Right.
And finding the humor in situations. Even when things are tough, if we can find a way to laugh at ourselves or the situation, it can really lighten the mood.
Totally. Laughter is the best medicine, right?
Absolutely. And joining the party, she's talking about saying yes to new experiences, even if they feel a bit outside our comfort zone. And living in the moment, not dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, but really savoring the present moment.
Okay.
And recognizing that time spent enjoying ourselves is never wasted, guilt-free fun.
I love that.
Sharing our space with others, being open and welcoming, and ultimately surrendering to the flow of life, trusting that we're exactly where we're supposed to be, even when we don't understand why.
It sounds like loosening our bone is really about letting go of that need for control and embracing the adventure of life.
Exactly. And Sincero is really good at pointing out those common roadblocks that keep us from creating the lives we want, like those negative beliefs and self-sabotaging habits that we all tend to fall into.
Oh yeah, she doesn't sugarcoat it. And she uses this hilarious analogy of a bird frantically trying to escape her living room by repeatedly flying into the window when the open door is right there.
That's such a perfect metaphor. It's like we often struggle and strive in ways that aren't working when the solution is often simpler than we realize.
It's about shifting our perspective, getting out of our own way, and recognizing the open doors that are already present.
Absolutely. And Sincero offers some great advice on how to do that. She encourages us to become aware of the stories we tell ourselves, those limiting beliefs that keep us playing small.
Yeah, like, I'm not good enough, or I'll never be able to do that, or it's too late for me.
Exactly. And she provides a whole list of those self-sabotaging phrases to watch out for, like, I always, or I never, or I can't, or I should, or I suck at.
Yeah, it's like those phrases are little red flags alerting us to those negative beliefs that are running the show behind the scenes.
Exactly. And once we've identified those beliefs, and Sarah suggests we ask ourselves, what am I actually gaining from holding on to these stories?
That's an interesting question. Like, what's the payoff for staying stuck?
Right. Because often there's a hidden benefit, like a sense of safety or familiarity, even if it's ultimately keeping us from living our best lives.
So it's like we're choosing comfort over growth.
In a way, yeah. And Sincero challenges us to dig a little deeper and ask ourselves, is this belief actually serving me? or is it time to let it go?
I love that. It's about taking responsibility for our own thoughts and beliefs and choosing ones that empower us rather than limit us.
Absolutely. And speaking of limiting beliefs, what about procrastination? That's a big one for a lot of
Oh
people.
my God, procrastination is my middle name. I know what I need to do, but I just keep putting it off.
Sincero has some great tips for overcoming procrastination. She starts by challenging us to honestly assess our qualifications.
Qualifications, what do you mean?
Like, often we disqualify ourselves before we even start.
Oh yeah,
We assume we need more experience, more knowledge, or more whatever before we can pursue our goals.
right.
But Sincero says that's often just our fear talking. She shares this funny story about landing her first job out of college, a role she was seemingly unqualified for, but managed to rock anyway.
I love that story.
It's a reminder that sometimes we're more ready than we think, and that taking action can be the best teacher.
So it's about trusting ourselves and jumping in, even if we don't feel 100% prepared.
Exactly. And she also encourages us to break down large tasks into smaller, more manageable steps.
Yeah, that's a good one. Sometimes I get so overwhelmed by the big picture that I don't even know where to start.
Right. But if we can break it down into smaller chunks, it feels less daunting.
And she even suggests making a bet with someone, like someone who will hold us accountable and make sure we follow through.
Oh, yeah, I love that one. It's like creating external motivation to counteract our internal resistance.
That's brilliant.
And another roadblock Sincero tackles is perfectionism.
Oh, yes, perfectionism. That need to get everything just right, which often leads to, well, nothing getting done.
Exactly. Sincero argues that perfectionism is often a mask for fear.
Fear.
Yeah, like a fear of failure or a fear of not being good enough. So we strive for perfection as a way to protect ourselves from those fears.
But it ends up backfiring because we never actually put ourselves out there.
Exactly. And Sincero encourages us to embrace the done is better than perfect philosophy.
Okay, I like that. It's about progress over perfection.
Right. It's about getting our work out into the world, knowing that we can always refine and improve it later.
And it's about enjoying the process. We don't have to wait for everything to be perfect before we allow ourselves to feel happy or fulfilled.
Absolutely. And speaking of feeling fulfilled, Sincero also talks about how to deal with overwhelm, which I think is something we can all relate to.
Oh, overwhelm is my constant companion. There's always so much to do, so much to think about, so much to worry about.
Sincero starts by encouraging us to watch our language. Like, how often do we say things like, I'm so busy, or I have so much on my plate?
Oh my gosh, all the time.
Right. But when we're constantly talking about how busy we are, it actually reinforces that feeling of overwhelm.
So it's like we're creating our own reality with our words.
Exactly. And Sincero suggests shifting our focus to what we enjoy about our work and finding moments of peace and spaciousness amidst the busyness. Like, what are some things you do to create those pockets of peace in your own life?
Honestly, sometimes it's as simple as taking a few deep breaths, stepping away from my computer and just looking out the window for a few minutes,
Yeah.
or going for a walk in nature. Anything to get out of my head for a bit.
That's great. And Sincero also encourages us to get real about our to-do lists. Like, are we taking on more than we can handle?
Oh, for sure.
Are we clinging to tasks that we could delegate or eliminate altogether? Are we prioritizing other people's needs at the expense of our own?
Ugh, guilty as charged. I'm a total people pleaser, and I often put everyone else's needs before my own.
Sincero talks about that too. It's about setting healthy boundaries, right? Learning to say no to things that drain our energy or don't align with our priorities.
That's so important, but it's so hard for me.
I know, it can be really challenging, especially if you're used to putting everyone else first. But Sincero reminds us that when we say yes to everyone else, we're often saying no to ourselves.
And that's not being a badass.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our own worth and making our own well-being a priority.
I love that. And Sincero also addresses that exhaustion that often accompanies overwhelm, right? She reminds us that taking time off is not a luxury, it's a necessity.
Absolutely. Rest and rejuvenation are essential for our physical and mental health, and they actually make us more productive in the long run.
So it's not about burning ourselves out and then crashing and burning.
Exactly. It's about creating a more balanced and sustainable approach to life, one that allows for both work and play, effort and ease.
And that brings us to perhaps the biggest obstacle to living a badass life.
Yeah.
Fear.
Ah, yes, fear, the ultimate dream killer. But Sincero has some really insightful perspectives on how to overcome fear and step into our power. And you know what? That's something we can delve into in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so last time we left off talking about fear, which honestly is something I think we all struggle with to some degree.
Oh, absolutely. Fear is just part of the human experience, right?
Right.
But like we were saying, Sincero's point is that we don't have to let fear control us. We can actually use it as fuel to propel us forward.
Yeah, I remember you were talking about flipping the fear. Like instead of focusing on what we're afraid of, we can ask ourselves, what am I afraid of not doing?
Exactly. Because often the regret of not taking action is way more painful than the fear itself.
So true. But even when we know that logically, fear can still feel so paralyzing in the moment. What else does Sincero suggest?
Well, she talks a lot about the importance of being present, because a lot of times fear lives in the future, right?
Right.
In all those what-if scenarios that we create in our mind.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like,
Yeah.
what if I fail? Or what if people judge me?
Exactly. And those what-ifs can really spiral out of control if we let them.
But if we can bring our attention back to the present moment, to what's actually happening right here, right now,
Yeah.
we can start to calm those fears and connect to a sense of peace and power.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we can only control our actions in this moment, not the outcome. And honestly, sometimes that's enough.
I love that. It reminds me of something I read about mindfulness, like focusing on our breath or the sensations in our body. It's a way to anchor ourselves in the present moment and quiet those racing thoughts.
Totally. And Sincero talks about that too, how important it is to be mindful of our thoughts, especially before bed. Because if we're going to sleep with all those fears and worries swirling in our heads, it's no wonder we wake up feeling anxious and stressed.
Yeah, it's like we're programming our subconscious mind with negativity.
Exactly. So she suggests replacing those negative thoughts with gratitude and positive affirmations, like I am capable or I am worthy or I am loved.
Oh, I like that. It's like we're creating a more supportive internal environment for ourselves.
Absolutely. And, something else that Sincere talks about is how our perceptions of other people often reveal more about ourselves than about them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's what she calls the millions of mirrors effect.
The millions of mirrors effect. What's that?
Well, she argues that the things that bother us about other people, like the things that really push our buttons,
Yeah.
often reflect aspects of ourselves that we've disowned or rejected.
Wow, that's deep.
It is. It's like we're projecting our own insecurities or judgments onto others.
So it's not really about them at all.
Right. It's about us.
Okay, that makes sense. Like, I know I've definitely had times where I've judged someone for being, like, too loud or too opinionated. And then I realized that those were qualities that I actually admired in others, but was afraid to express in myself.
Exactly. And Sincero shares this great story about her friendship with a woman she calls Pink, who was, like, super girly and flamboyant, which was totally different from Sincero's own tomboyish personality. And at first, Sincero found Pink's femininity kind of irritating. But then she realized that her reaction was really stemming from her own discomfort with expressing her feminine side.
That's a great example. So
Yeah.
how do we use this millions of mirrors effect to our advantage?
Sincero encourages us to question our judgments. Instead of just reacting, we can ask ourselves, what is it about this person or situation that's triggering me?
Yeah.
And in what ways am I like this person?
Okay.
It's not about making ourselves wrong, but about using those reflections as opportunities for growth and self-acceptance.
So it's like turning those judgments into curiosity.
Exactly. It's about asking, what can I learn from this, rather than just getting caught up in the drama.
I love that. It's like a whole new way of looking at relationships.
Absolutely. And it's a great way to cultivate more compassion for ourselves and others.
Okay, so we've talked about facing our fears, being present, understanding our judgments, and cultivating self-love. What else does Sincero recommend for creating a badass life?
Well, another big one is making decisions, because indecision can be just as paralyzing as fear.
Right. Oh my gosh, yes. I am the queen of indecision.
Yeah.
I can spend hours agonizing over the smallest things, like what to eat for dinner or what to wear.
And Sincero says that all that agonizing is actually a form of self-torture. It's like we're stuck in this limbo and we're not actually moving forward in any direction.
So how do we break free from that cycle of indecision?
Sincero encourages us to be decisive, even if it means making a wrong decision, because often any decision is better than no decision at all.
Right, because at least we're moving.
Exactly. And she also talks about the importance of trusting our intuition, that inner voice that often knows what's best for us, even if we can't logically explain it.
I love that. But sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between our intuition and our fear. you know?
Yeah, that's true. But Sincero says that our intuition usually feels expansive and exciting, while fear feels constricting and limiting.
Okay, that's helpful. So it's about tuning into that feeling, and if it feels good, go for it.
Exactly. And even if things don't work out the way we planned, at least we learned something from the experience.
Right, it's all part of the journey.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another important aspect of creating a badass life, which is having a healthy relationship with money.
Oh yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier, how Sincero sees money as a relationship.
Exactly. And she argues that our beliefs about money can have a huge impact on our financial reality.
Like, if we believe that money is evil or that rich people are greedy,
Hmm.
we're probably not going to attract a lot of wealth into our lives.
Right. Because our beliefs create our reality.
So how do we shift those beliefs?
Well, Sincero talks about the importance of respecting money, treating it as a valuable resource that deserves our attention and care, and she encourages us to shift our mindset from scarcity to abundance, believing that there's more than enough to go around.
Okay, so instead of focusing on what we don't have,
Right.
we can focus on what we do have and be grateful for it.
Exactly. Gratitude is a powerful tool for attracting abundance into our lives.
And she also talks about setting clear financial goals and taking inspired action towards those goals.
Yes. It's not enough to just wish for more money. We have to actually take steps to create it.
So it's like a combination of mindset and action.
Exactly. And, Sincere's final chapter focuses on the power of surrender, which might seem counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, especially since we've been talking about taking action and creating our own reality.
Exactly. But surrender isn't about giving up or becoming passive. It's about letting go of our need to control the outcome and trusting that the universe has our back.
Okay, so it's like a letting go, but with trust.
Exactly. It's about aligning our intentions with the flow of the universe and then releasing our grip, knowing that we're being guided to where we need to be.
I love that. And she has that beautiful analogy of the butterfly landing on our nose when we stop chasing it so frantically.
Hmm.
It's about letting go of the struggle and allowing the good stuff to come to us.
Yes. Surrender is about trusting that the universe has a plan for us, even if we can't see it yet.
And that everything is unfolding exactly as it's supposed to.
Absolutely. It's about having faith, even when things feel uncertain.
I love that. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into You Are a Badass. From understanding our subconscious programming to embracing self-love, from overcoming fear to surrendering to the flow of the universe, Sincero offers so much wisdom for creating a life that's aligned with our highest potential.
She really does. It's like a roadmap for living a more authentic, joyful, and fulfilling life.
Exactly. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that we have far more power than we realize to shape our own reality. It's about choosing empowering thoughts and beliefs, taking inspired action, and trusting that we're supported every step of the way.
I agree. And it's about remembering that we're all a work in progress. There's no finish line to this thing called life.
Right. It's about embracing the journey with all its ups and downs, knowing that even the challenges are opportunities for growth and expansion.
Exactly. And as Sincero reminds us, that journey starts with self-love.
That's a great reminder. Well, we hope this deep dive has inspired you to tap into your own inner badass and create a life that truly lights you up. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of your sources.